30 years ago, in a city in a mountainous region of Brazil, several residents say they saw a cigar-shaped object crash into a field. The story gets stranger. 3 teenage girls reportedly encountered a non-human being, they say, with red eyes, covered with oil, with veins from its neck to its arms. Rumors swirled that Brazil's military captured 1 or 2 of the beings and handed them off to the CIA and the FBI. The claims have never been proven, but that hasn't stopped the decades of speculation that has helped turn this incident into Brazil's Roswell. Now, 30 years later, the mystery is once again drawing attention. Witnesses and experts recently gathered in Washington to share their accounts and call for greater transparency around it. The first witness to speak was a man named Carlos. He says he arrived at the crash site and something bizarre happened.
Nesse momento, estava.
At that point, I was in the middle of the wreckage, and I picked up a lightweight fragment resembling aluminum foil. I crumpled it in my hand, but when I let go, it instantly resumed its shape.
Another witness was a doctor who claims he treated one of these non-human beings, an apparent survivor of the crash. He said the moment he saw it, he knew it was not human.
Its serenity and powerful presence led me to believe it had a very high level of intelligence and perception, higher than human beings.
Missouri Republican Congressman Eric Burlison attended the event where Carlos and that doctor made those extraordinary claims. And then just last week, the congressman asked the FBI and the CIA to release any records they have related to the case. I had the chance to speak with Congressman Burlison about why he thinks more answers are needed. Congressman, this is arguably one of the most infamous and controversial UFO cases. It's known as Brazil's Roswell because of all the conspiracies and fascination around it. First of all, have you heard back anything from the CIA and the FBI after sending those letters last week?
I've not heard back directly. Whenever I first heard about this incident, James Fox came to the Capitol. He brought some individuals with him from Brazil. I got to meet the physicians that were at the hospital. I got to meet the gentleman that was there whenever the crash first happened. And so I got to meet people, and I couldn't speak their language, but we were able to hear through a translator their firsthand accounts, and it was very interesting and compelling, especially for some people that are risking their careers to come forward. And at that time, there was a press conference, and some agents from the FBI came up to me and said that they would be happy to investigate this event, and requested that I submit a letter. So we did that about a year ago from that press conference, and then now we're following up with not only now that President Trump has issued his statement. I think that there's a renewed energy on this topic. So we sent that letter to not only them, but the CIA.
Yeah, when you talk about meeting with the doctors, the Brazilian doctors in this case, one of these doctors says he treated some non-human life form that was injured in the crash. He said it sort of looked like a small child with a teardrop-shaped head, and that it seemed to be intelligent and grateful for the medical attention.
Yeah, it was. That was what his account was. What I found interesting is that he said that the way the alien didn't speak to him, obviously, but he could sense from the alien that it was grateful, but also that the alien was, in essence, placating us, that it thought it was almost cute that we were trying to provide health care for it. And so that was something that I took away from his testimony that I thought was interesting.
How believable did you find these witnesses?
You know, they've got a lot to risk. I mean, when you have someone who's a surgeon, who's a medical professional, who could lose his license, he could lose his ability to practice, he could be fired from the hospital that he's working at. That's really compelling. We also we heard from someone who was who does testing, who was testing the blood samples of one of the individuals, the military personnel, that they said that he expired because of an interaction with either the craft or the alien. And so that individual had tested and found that there was a type of bacteria or a type of microorganism that was unknown, that they could not identify, that was related to that individual's death.
This is one of the soldiers who arrived at the scene, a Brazilian soldier who arrived at the scene of the crash. There were several, but one of them who actually went up and touched the craft or touched these beings later died. We don't know, or did he tell you we just don't know what that bacteria is?
That's right. They couldn't identify the bacteria. So that's one of the things that we've requested, is that the FBI, request that they exhume the body if possible. We have contacts with the Brazilian authorities, and that's something that we're exploring. Also to see if that material that was tested, if that's been retained in any way.
You have described yourself as dubious when it comes to UFO conspiracy theories. You are not one of these people running around saying, there are aliens here and we need to investigate more because I believe in it. I mean, you have been very, very careful about withholding any judgment. How believable, I mean, it sounds like you found these witnesses to be somewhat credible.
Yeah, and in general in this topic, I find that people believe what they experienced. I just am not someone that's going to believe it until I experience it myself. And so I don't think that people are purposefully trying to come forward and lie. I think that their motives are pretty honest. But at the end of the day, I'm in search of the truth, and I'm not going to stop until I get the cold, hard facts or the materials in my hands. And I think that that's what the American people want. Look, we've heard a lot of narratives and a lot of stories, and they make for great stories, but that's about where it ends. And I think that I think that the public wants and deserves someone that's going to pursue the real hard facts and the truth.
The witnesses that you spoke to have long alleged that the United States government arrived on the scene of this crash, of this non-human spacecraft, and took the remains or this living being with them. If that happened, the CIA would have to know about this, right?
One would think, and so that's one of the things that we're requesting, is the flight logs to identify any U.S. military or any government planes that might have flown into that region during that window of time. We're requesting any kind of any records whatsoever that might point to any validity or validating of this story.
Because so far you don't have anything to validate what these witnesses are telling you.
So far, we've not heard back from the FBI or the CIA, but I do think that I do know that they are looking into this, and they're doing their own investigations. All
right, Congressman Eric Burlison, I sure hope you hear back from the CIA or FBI soon. I know you sent those letters to the directors of each of those agencies on July 7th. It'll be nearly a week. Hopefully you'll get an answer soon. Appreciate it.
We'll let you know, Elizabeth. We'll let you know as soon as we can.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.